This conference will now be recorded.
Yesterday we discussed about flow reference component, and we have seen the hands-on exercise like how to call flows from with the help of flow reference exactly. And yesterday we haven't seen these types of flows. Types of flows are main flows, subflow, private flow. We'll see that, and what is the scope of that payload, attributes, and variables in these flows specifically. Any queries till now, actually from yesterday or day before yesterday sessions and all? Any queries? Okay, fine. I'll proceed further. Today we'll discuss like the types of flows. Okay, we have different flows like main flow, private flow, and subflow, and I will go in deep detail about each flow basically, and then we'll see the differences. We'll see the differences here and the scope of payload, attributes, and variables in different flows. Yesterday I have shown you between the two flows exactly, but in different flows how it behaves. We'll see that also exactly. Okay, fine. Now if you see, before going to this particular session, I just wanted to show you something in yesterday's session exactly. See here, if you see, yesterday I have shown you the scope of variables, attributes, and payload, right? Exactly. What happened? Payload is overwritten. That payload is overwritten and passed to the flow reference. This is one point which I want to mention. And one more thing, what happened by default after the mule event is coming to flow reference, it's coming here, okay, and then the processing at this point is not happening till this process is completed. Okay, this process is completed and then message is passed to the next component of flow reference. Okay, you got it. What does it mean exactly? It means after coming to flow reference in parent flow, the mule event is passed to the child flow set payload basically. Okay, set payload, and again it is passed to set variable coming to logger, and then it is going to the logger component of the parent flow. Yesterday I showed you, like in the diagram itself I have already showed you. See, it's coming, it's processing here, and then it's going back. Till that point of time, this process is not happening. It is coming here, it's completing the process, getting the mule event again to the next component. Okay, that way it happens basically by default. Okay, please keep this in your mind. There is one more concept called target variable. I'll explain that. What is the target variable and how we can keep the existing payload itself exactly without overwriting that. Okay, in the flow reference component itself we have that basically. Now we'll see that as a practical, and then we'll go to the today's session. Yesterday what happened? What is the payload? Parent flow payload is the payload. After coming here, what is happened? Child flow payload is overwritten, and then it is passed and it is sent as a response. But I don't want this child flow payload should overwrites this parent flow payload basically. Then how to do that exactly? There is an option in flow reference component. Okay, if you see in flow reference, we have display name, we have just display name and flow name and we have target and target value. See, what is the meaning of target value? Yesterday we have written target value, but we haven't written anything in the target basically. It means that, see what happens, target value is nothing but the payload which is coming, or the message you wanted to store exactly from this child flow. From this child flow should be written here. By default, generally it will be payload. You can write whatever you want. For example, like only in payload also, I need only one aspect of that particular payload. I can extract that and I can write it here. But see it in general terminology, basically, like we are checking at the broader picture right now. Now we are taking the payload to the child payload to the main flow or the parent flow basically. Now what I will do, I will write this target is nothing but it is also a variable basically. If I write some what I will write some name basically, child flow target. Okay, child flow target. I just saved like this. Okay, Control S. Now I'll debug it. Variable is nothing but just to store something basically, any value. Okay, example, like this payload is coming here. Okay, and obviously as soon as, see, for example, like this payload is coming here and it is braked with the help of some other processor. I just wanted to access this payload at later point of stage. We can store that payload in the variable, and that variable is accessible across all the project, all the flows in the project exactly. What is the scope of variable? Variable can be accessed anywhere in the project. Okay, you can store, for example, like here I can turn it into expression mode and keep it as payload, and then the same payload can be accessed anywhere else exactly. Okay, now if you see what happened here, this parent payload came here and it is overwritten, and here you can't access the same payload. In that instance, if you want to use this, you can store that in variable and access it here. Okay, that and all we'll see in practicals later point of stage. Don't worry about that. Okay, fine. Now we'll see whether our application is deployed or not. It is deployed. Now I'll go to Postman. Hope you guys are practicing actually. Without practicing, it would be difficult. I'm reiterating the point. I triggered the flow. Now we received the message here. Now go to debugger, next processor. Okay. Yesterday you have seen only one variable, if you remember. Okay. Right now I can see two variables. What is that exactly? This is the second variable. Oh, sorry. Yesterday also we have seen two variables, right? This variable and this variable, obviously. Now we'll see what is happening. Okay, copy this, Control A, Control C, go to Mule Debugger. And there is another important thing called X plus Y mode. Whenever you have got something, some doubt exactly with the expression and all, you can check, go to this X plus Y mode, click on it and give the expression there. Now I told you already, to access the variable, what is the keyword? Vars dot, right? Now I have given vars dot child flow target. If you see, what is the message? Child flow payload, child flow payload. Just click on escape. Automatically this X plus Y window will go disappear basically. Okay, fine. Now, how many variables are there? 3 variables are there. But if you see in the Mule debugger screen, you can see only 2, but there is another variable called target variable actually. Where is it storing? In child flow target. This is accessible here itself. If you see, I showed you in Mule debugger, right? For example, vars dot child flow target. It's already accessible. And now if you see the payload also, what will be the payload? Parent flow payload. But yesterday, what is the payload? Child flow payload. Because yesterday it's overwritten basically. But today I'm telling not to overwrite. Whatever you're getting the result from this particular child flow payload, store it in the target variable of flow reference exactly. If you store that in target variable, what happens? Whatever payload you have passed here, it will be remaining in the same. Remain the same. That's why we have parent flow payload. Now click on escape. I'll click on next. We'll see the result. See, parent flow payload. Okay. For just showing the difference, I will show you. I'll remove this target, child flow target, Control S. I'll check the console. Automatically build option is enabled. That's why it will run and start the app. Once I see the started app, actually, then only I'll be able to hit from the Postman. Yeah, see here, started app is done. Now I can hit it from Postman. I'll go to Postman. I'll just resume it because I again debug. Okay, I resumed it. It processed, and if you go to Postman, it is there. See here, child flow payload. Here, if I am not assigning the target variable, automatically what happens? This parent payload is already overwritten with the help of this child payload. Okay, child flow payload, and it is passed to the flow reference here, and in turn to the response session, and then to the Postman. That's what. This is one thing which I wanted to show you. Now we'll go to the presentation. And we have discussed a target variable also. Okay, now see. We wanted to see, I told you yesterday, there are 3 types of flows. One is main flow, private flow, and subflow. We'll see what is the main flow, what is the subflow, what is the private flow. Just first we'll see what is main flow. Main flow, public flow, only flow, same. Don't get confused. Whenever people call main flow, public flow, or flow, it means that it's a flow, basically. Main flow only. See, main flow is a message processing block that has its own processing and exception handling. What is this? Meaning, if I go to Anypoint Studio, it is a message processing block. Message processing block means simple. We are processing messages, right, or events, right, in a flow. That's what it means. That technically we are calling it as message processing block. Source, error handling, and process, right? Message processing block means event is coming, sorry, a request is coming. We are converting into message or event and then processing. That's what it means exactly. Okay, which has its own processing and error exception handling. Already I told you exception handling is there. Okay, processing strategy also, whether how to process this message as synchronous or asynchronous. There are some other processing strategies. Don't worry about that exactly at this point of time. I'll explain you that also in detail. it has its own processing and exception handling. That's what it means. This flow is typically used for connecting applications, because why? It will be having source. If it has source, automatically it can connect the different applications. This main flow will have source, process, and error handling. I'll go to AnyPoint Studio. Can we call this as a main flow or flow or public flow? Yes. Why? It has source component configured, it has process components, and it has error handling, obviously. And even this can be called as a main flow. Yes, obviously. It has source, okay, it has process, it has its own error handling. Okay. Calling a main flow from a flow, or say calling a main flow from main flow is possible. Yes, it's possible. Yesterday we have done the same exactly. We called child flow from this flow. See, again, don't confuse with this parent flow and child flow. Exactly. Any flow which has source, process, and error handling is known as main flow or public flow. Okay, you got it right. Here, if you see, source is there, process is there, error handling is there. That's why we call it as main flow. Next, subflow. Yesterday I already told you why we want to break flows into separate project into separate flows exactly. Yesterday, if you remember, I told you reusability, and I have clearly shown you also if the flow is becoming too linear, too big exactly, it's too difficult for the visibility. That's the reason in these two instances we will break the main project into different flows. Logically, we will decide like this block has to be in one flow, this block has to be one flow. That way we'll do that exactly. But for doing that, we have different kinds of flows that we are discussing right now exactly. And among that flow types, we have another flow type called subflow. What is a subflow? Again, subflow is a message processing block that is similar to that of a flow, but with some limitations. It is similar to flow only, but it has some limitations. What is that limitations exactly? It doesn't have event source, it doesn't have error handling. But how to do that exactly? Subflow inherits processing and exception handling strategies from the calling flow itself. Okay, what does it mean? It means whatever processing strategy, whatever error handling is in the main flow or calling flow, we'll call it as calling flow, the same will be accessed in the subflow. Okay, subflow will not have source, error handling, and it inherits processing and exception handling strategies from the calling flow. When you build the application, flow reference component that call a subflow is replaced by the content of the subflow. Basically, what does it mean? It means that, for example, we have this is calling flow, this is subflow. Subflow, I told only we don't have source, we don't have error handling, and we have only process. Here we have source, error handling, we have process. Okay, now we call this particular flow. It processed, again it is sent here. Okay, visually it is seen as two flows here, but when you build the application, I told you with the help of Maven we build the application, right? When you build the application, what happens? This flow reference will be replaced by this code. Exactly. It doesn't happen visually, but in the background it happens like that. It means that it acts as a code of this flow only. But visually we are seeing two flows, but in the background it is one flow only. It acts like a one flow. That's the meaning of this particular point. This is very important. Okay, when you build the application, flow reference component that call a subflow is replaced by the content of the subflow. What is the meaning of this flow reference here? It is telling that go here, process the event, and then get the response. Okay, but in the background, the entire process also happens here itself because the code is replaced here. This entire code is replaced here. Code means what? That XML, whatever you are seeing. Okay, got it right? Now let's go into AnyPoint Studio, and I have shown you here again, source is available, process is available, error handling is available. If you go to Mule palette, if you type subflow, we have a component called subflow. Can you see anything here apart from source, error handling, or anything? I'll drag and drop flow also for just seeing the difference. If you see here, source is there, process is there, error handling is there. But in subflow, we don't have anything. Just now I told you, we don't have event source. Event source means source. Okay, we don't have error handling. Error handling block is not available here, if you see. And how error handling will happen? For example, like I am calling this particular subflow from this flow. For example, main flow. What happens? This flow reference component, whatever is here, will be replaced by this code. Okay, error handling also will be taken care by the main flow itself or the calling flow itself. That's what subflow inherits processing and exception handling strategies from the flow itself, calling flow itself. That's what difference. There is a separate component called subflow in the Mule palette, which you can drag and drop, and then you can utilize that particular drag and drop. And what you can do, you can change the name here. For example, like subflow. No need to change anything. And if you want to do something processing here, you can do that subflow and transform, for example, like okay, only processing will take care. When we go for this subflow, I told you already, whenever your main flow is becoming too big, or whenever this subflow has to be utilized by multiple flows, then only we'll go for subflows basically. And always I suggest you people to go for subflows exactly whenever the flow is becoming too big or whenever you want to reuse, rather than private flows. I'll tell you what is the reason. Because subflow acts as a code in the calling flow. Basically what happens, the performance will be better in terms of the execution and all. That's the reason I always suggest to go for subflow. But whenever you require exception strategy also in the subflow or in this flow, basically whenever you want to break the code and reuse that code, if you want to have the exception strategy also, then only go for private flow. Okay, I'll just explain the private flow and then I come to this point also. We'll see what happens exactly. Now I'll go to the presentation. Now subflow, any questions till now? Any questions till now? Shall I proceed? Please respond. Okay, okay, yeah. See, now I'm going to explain private flow. Latif, see here, we are starting the session at 7:45. Okay, I think you might have forgotten that. We're not starting the session at 8 o'clock. We're starting at 7:45. If you can join at 7:45, it would be great actually. Okay, fine. Now, what is a private flow? Just now I told you main flow and subflow. But in real time, most of the time we'll be using main flow and subflows exactly. But whenever there is a requirement for a private flow, we should be aware of it. What is a private flow and how to use that? Okay. See, private flow is a message processing block. I already told. Message processing block means I already told you, simple, same process. Mule event comes in and there will be some processing happening. Okay, right. Source is that has its own processing and exception handling. No, this point is wrong exactly. I'll delete this point. Sorry. Okay, fine. See, one more thing is like we are telling as it has its own processing and exception handling strategies, and this flow has process and error handling but no source. Okay, whenever there is no separate, I'll go to studio, there is no separate scope or component here for private flow. If you see here, private flow, anything is available? No, there is no separate thing basically. Okay, we can drag and drop flow only. Okay, flow is there. Don't okay, and write its own error handling here. Then this will become the private flow. Okay, it because it doesn't have the source. Why source is required? Whenever you wanted to connect with the systems, outside systems, okay, obviously then there is a source requirement. Then how does the source where does the source is available? In the main flow, you get the message from the consumer, and then there is a source. It will take that, and private flows or subflows can be accessible because they don't have source, right, from the project itself. Okay, please remember that exactly. Okay, now I told, see, there will be questions on what are the differences between main flow, subflow, and private flow. Please explain the different types of flows. All these questions will be there in interviews exactly. Okay, I'll just repeat it once again. Main flow is a message processing block that has its own processing and exception handling. Okay, that will be having source, process, and error handling. And this is typically used for connecting applications because it has its source. We should tell at least these points. At least if you are not able to remember entire thing, a flow which has source, process, and error handling is known as main flow. At least you have to tell this point exactly. Now we'll come to subflow. What is a subflow? A subflow doesn't have event source. Subflow doesn't have error handling. Subflow will have only the process part. And there is a separate component in the mule palette which can be dragged and dropped to the configuration XML exactly. We can tell that. Okay. And coming to private flow is a message processing block which has its own processing and exception handling strategies, but it doesn't have source. We should tell these points exactly whenever they ask questions. They ask, explain different flows. Two questions will be coming in. Explain different flows. And one more thing, differences between flows. Flows means main flow, private flow, and subflow. I'm not writing for the convenience purpose here, basically. Okay, these two questions will come in interview for sure. At least 60 to 70% of the time, they'll be asking these questions. Okay, fine. Now, next thing is I wanted to see the differences in a table. Here it is, right? Public flow or main flow or flow. Okay, I'm just again reiterating this point exactly. Normally people call it as flow only. They never call it as in real time also. They don't get used to that terminology and all exactly, most of the developers. But senior people, I observe always senior people, okay, they talk the terminology. That is one more suggestion I always give to the people. Use the terminology whenever required and whenever possible. How it comes exactly? By practice. For example, like go here, go there, don't use that. Go to mule palette, go to package explorer. Okay, go to main flow, go to calling flow, go to child flow. This way, if you use the terminology, what happens? People see you in a different manner, and it is very helpful for your career also, because if you talk with the terminology, what happens, it gives a very positive impact to the other people also. Okay, right. Now I just told you source, process part, and error handling part. Okay, any flow will have these three things, but we'll see public flow has source, already I told you. Processor, yes. Error handling also, yes. Public flow or main flow or flow will have these three components, exactly three parts. Subflow, I already told you, source will not be there. Okay, and process part only will be there. Error handling, no. But how error handling will be done, or how the source part, it will be using the calling flow. Okay, right. Now private flow, I told you source is not available. Processor, yes. Error handling, it has its own error handling. Okay, if you remember this table, it is easy to answer in the interviews. For example, like you have 3 slides to remember, but here you have one simple table. See, public flow, source, processor, error handling, 3 are available. Okay, in subflow we have only process, rest 2 are not available. In private flow we only don't have source, we have processor and error handling. If you remember this particular diagram or table, it will be very easy for you. Just mug up this exactly for answering the interviews. Okay, now got it? Any doubts till now? Any doubts? Okay, yeah, fine then. See, one more concept I'm going to discuss now. Actually, like just now, I have already showed you the scope of variables, payload, and attributes, right? But I have just shown you generally in a generic scenario exactly how is that happening. But in specific scenario, like from if you are calling a private flow from a main flow or a subflow from a private flow, what happens and all exactly, I will just show you the theoretical part. If you don't remember this also, don't worry, but keep this as reference whenever you go to the real time or whenever you wanted to attend an interview. At that point of time, just go through this particular part and keep in your mind. That would be great. Exactly. Okay, there may be some scenario based questions at that point of time. This will be very helpful. And whenever you're developing some tricky applications and all, at that point of time also, this will be really helpful. And even most of the senior people will get confused at this level exactly. But just have this, I will explain this, and if you don't remember also, that's not a worry. And whenever you practice, right, do this as a practice and then try to keep it in your mind. Okay, fine. Now I told you we'll discuss the scope of variables, right? Scope of mule event, exactly. Scope of mule event. Mule event consists of, if you remember, what? Message, variables. But message again consists of payload, attributes. See, I am repeating so many things exactly because of the reason they are very important. You should always remember this. Even there will be an interview question on What is the mule event structure? Please explain. Explain mule event structure or mule 4 message structure. Don't confuse. Message structure means you should explain the entire thing. Mule event will consist of message and variables. Again, message will be consisting of payload and attributes. Exactly. You should tell this. Okay. This is very, very important. And even certification also, there will be a lot of questions based on this particular mule event structure. Okay. Now, I just wanted to introduce 3 terminologies here, basically. Added on. Added on means, what is the meaning of added on? A new value is added in addition to the existing things. Exactly. Okay. Why this will be useful, I'll tell you now exactly in some time itself. Added on means already something is available and it will be on top of it, new one will be added. Okay. New value is added in addition to the existing values. Okay. This is the meaning of added on. Carried forward. Carried forward means from one place to another place, the same has been carried forward. What same? Mule event, basically. Overwritten. Existing value is replaced by the new value. I think you might have already understanding, because just now we discussed like scope of variables with the help of target variable, right? Scope of mule event with the help of target variable. The same way we are discussing for all the things, exactly. For all flows and all different kinds of flows. See, overwritten means the existing value is replaced with a new value. Added on means for existing value, new value also will be added. Carried forward means the same has been carried forward to the other thing. And overwritten means the new value will be replacing the existing value. Okay, right. Now, next. See this scenario. What is this scenario? Okay, see here. Source, error handling, and process. Okay, obviously it has, we can call it as a public flow or main flow, because it has source part, it has process part, error handling part. Now I have a subflow. I have only process part, and with the help of flow reference, I called this flow. Okay, there is some blocks. It came here, then it will be passed on to the. Okay, this is the actual representation. Now, this is the scenario. From public flow, I'm calling a subflow. Now, what happens to the mule event? That's what. Mule event means, already I told you, it is a combination of all these things, right? Attributes, payload, and variables. I broke them into 3 parts here, and then I'm showing exactly what happens exactly. Now, the mule event came to flow reference, and then mule event will be passed to subflow. Here, what is happening? Attributes, payload, and variables. 3 are getting carried forward. Carried forward means it's passing to the subflow. Okay. Whether it can be accessible in subflow? Yes, we can access them and we can use them. What you can access them and use them? Attributes can be used, payload can be used, variable can be used. That is the meaning of this exactly. Now, in subflow, what happens exactly? That we'll see. What happens to the attributes? What happens to the payload? What happens to the variables exactly? Yesterday, I have shown you, I added one variable in the main flow itself. I called a main flow from a main flow basically, and then I have shown you. But the same scenario is applicable here also. Don't worry about that. Variables, I have created a new variable. What happened? The main flow variable existed and second variable existed, and what happened? 2 variables are passed to the main flow basically. It is telling added on. Added on means one old variable also will be available, and a new variable which is generated in subflow also will be added to the variables, and then it will be passed to the parent flow or public flow. Here in this class, public flow we are discussing. Now, what about payload? It is overwritten. If you are not specifying anything, it will, without keeping a target variable, what happened exactly? It has overwritten the payload. That's what we are meaning here. Modified at say payload component. We can use set payload component, or there is another component called transform message. That component can be used to modify the payload. We can modify the existing payload. If you are modifying, obviously it will be overwritten, and the payload which is coming from parent flow or public flow will not be same. It is overwritten. Attributes can be overwritten in subflow with the help of transform message component, but most probably we will not be using this option. We will not modify any attributes exactly. This is very rare scenario. These two are very frequent scenarios, but attributes is very rare scenario. Okay, but whenever you get that question exactly, you should be able to answer what is happening. Attributes, by this is by default exactly. If you want to change, we can change that. Okay, attributes can be overwritten, payload can be overwritten, variables will be added. Okay, see here how it will be modified or overwritten with the help of transform message, and how this payload can be done with the help of set payload or transform message. Obviously, when you do set variable, a new variable will be generated, and we can do that exactly. Okay, fine. Now, this is scenario for public flow as the parent flow, and this is as the child flow. I already told you parent flow is nothing but the calling flow is known as parent flow, and reference flow is known as the child flow. In this case, parent flow is subflow. Parent flow is public flow, and child flow is subflow. Okay, fine. If you don't remember this, also don't worry. Just keep this in mind, but understand logically. Whenever you get the scenario, what is happening, and whenever you are practicing, but this practice and all you have to do. I cannot do. Basically, if I do that for this only, it will take my a whole session, whole course duration itself. Okay, that's the reason you people have to practice this. I explained this, right? Take this as reference and try to create one public flow, create a subflow, and then pass all the attributes, payload, and variables. How this happens as per this scenario, it is happening or not. You people have to practice accordingly. Now, the second scenario. What is the second scenario? Calling a private flow from public flow. I already told you what is a private. First, we'll draw public flow. Public flow has error handling, source, process. This is public flow. It's clear. We have a flow reference component somewhere here. Flow reference. Now I have private flow. Process, error handling. Source. No source. We don't have any source. I'm just doing this. And we have some message process or event process. Okay. Now I'm calling this flow. Where this is called as private flow. I'll write in full form, because even for public flow, I told PF. Obviously, this also will become PF, right? Obviously, private flow. Now I called private flow from public flow. What happens? It comes directly to here. It executes. Again, it will pass the response back to the thing, basically. And in this scenario, how your attributes, payload, and variables will be behaving. We'll see that now. We are carrying forward attributes, payload, variables. As soon as it comes to here, this flow reference is passing the whole mule event. At this point of time, what is the mule event? That whole mule event is passing the flow reference is passing to the private flow. Okay, that means all attributes, payload, and variables are getting carried forward. Whether we can access these attributes? Yes, Same as previous scenario only. We can access payload, we can access variables. Access means we can use them. Exactly. That's what the meaning is exactly. Okay. Now, in the previous scenario, we can overwrite attributes in subflow. In private flow, that is not possible. It is just carried forward. We can use them, we cannot change them. Remains unchanged throughout the flow. The same attributes will be passed again. Now, payload. Payload can be overwritten with the help of set payload and transform message. Variables added on, same as the previous scenario. Set variable component. Okay, you got it? The same scenario. Only thing is attributes are not getting modified in the private flow. That is the only difference between the previous scenario and this scenario. Okay, that way, what is the change? You have to remember those kind of things exactly. Okay, but this is a rare scenario. Most frequently used. Okay, calling subflow from a parent flow or sorry, a public flow. This scenario. Now, next. I just want to show you 4 scenarios exactly. I have already shown you 2 scenarios. I just wanted to show you another 2 scenarios also. What is this exactly? Private flow, and we are calling subflow. Same, carried forward, carried forward, carried forward. Attributes, payload, and variables, and they are accessible. They are carried forward and they are accessible. Okay, in the subflow, I already told you attributes can be overwritten with the help of transform message component. Okay, payload can be overwritten with the help of set payload and transform message, and variables added on, same only. New variables dependent set variable component. Only difference is this. If you see, this looks complex, but if you simplify that, it's very easy. Exactly. Okay, this is the scenario between private flow and subflow. From private flow, we are calling the subflow. This is the scenario. From private flow, we are calling subflow. Okay, this is the scenario. Next scenario. This is the scenario yesterday we have done. If you see public flow, public flow. Got it? I'll show in the studio itself once again. Because why we are calling it as public flow? Because both has listener source, both has process. Error handling, we haven't done it, but both has error handling components. This is also called as main flow. This is also called as main flow or public flow. Basically, public flow, public flow. Now, the scenario is actually the same scenario. This main flow is calling this main flow. Got it right? The same scenario. What happened? Attributes carried forward, payload carried forward, variables carried forward. Yesterday I have debugged and shown you all 3 are carried forward here, right? Yesterday I debugged and showed you at this point of time. Okay. After this also I'll show you just for 2-3 minutes, and then we'll clearly understand what is happening exactly. Now, next, whether they are accessible. Obviously, they are accessible in the child public flow. Okay, fine. Now, what is happening with the attributes? We are not going to make any changes. It cannot happen by default. Okay, they will be just carried forward, remains unchanged and throughout exactly. Payload can be overwritten with the help of set payload and transform message. Variables added on. I already showed you. What happened? I added one more variable. We are getting 2 variables here. If you see, remember, added on. Okay. I'll just, what I will do, it is already running, right? I'll see the path, flow, right? Okay, flow. I'll debug it. Okay, I'll send the request. Oh, it's not running over. I'll just debug it. I'll just show you the what happens at this point of time before flow reference. What happens after coming to this flow, okay, and what happens after this flow reference. Yesterday I showed you, but I'll show you once again. Then this particular concept will be more clearer. Console, it's failed basically. What is the reason it failed? We'll check it out. Okay, okay. Why? What happened? We have so many things which we haven't configured exactly. Okay, that's the reason it's not getting deployed. We'll delete all this. Yeah, stuck. Just wait for a moment. Even you will face all this scenario. See here. Now it's stuck. Now it's got into the normal mode. Now if you see, you have only two flows. I haven't saved it. When I am trying to debug the project, it's asking save. Yes, save. Before running it or deploying it, what happens is it will ask for the save exactly. If you want to save it and then do it. Otherwise, if you don't want to affect that changes for the particular run, don't save and then proceed. This mule debug option is very important. It will be very helpful. And this X plus Y mode in debug, exactly. Just now I have shown you today, right? That also is very important. I'll make you to adapt to this particular features when we are doing the flows exactly. Okay, don't worry. But just go to mule debugger. What is this? Click on it. Play around it for some time. Do all these kind of things exactly. Okay. Now deploy. I'll hit it. See here, this already I told you, this listener will convert that HTTP message into mule event. That is already done already. And then we are setting the payload here. We are setting the variable here. I'm just go to mule debugger, click on next processor. At this point of time, see your debugger point came to flow reference. It means that this flow reference, before flow reference, what is the mule event? We can see here basically. That will be displayed here. After it is, for example, it came to next processor, then only it will show the status of that flow reference point basically. Okay. Now, what is the payload? Parent flow payload. We already set the payload here. What is the variable? How many variables? One variable. What is that variable? Parent flow variable. Parent variable is the name and parent flow variable is the value. Okay, we can store anything exactly in a variable. We can store a big response also. I'm just hard coding here, but the same can be replicated for a big response also. Okay, don't worry about it. Now, if I click on next, where it will go, this flow reference will be going to the processing part of the child flow, right? Next. See here, what is the thing I'm telling you in the presentation? Carried forward, carried forward, carried forward. Attributes, payload, and variables. We'll see the same thing. Payload, parent flow, payload, whatever is available here. It's carried forward. Yes. Variables, one variable, parent flow variable is carried forward. Yes. Attributes, same attributes what are available here, the same attributes are carried forward, because there are so many details here. That's why we can't again come here and then evaluate everything, but same will be carried forward. That is the meaning of this carried forward, carried forward, carried forward. And whether they are accessible here, obviously accessible. Now how I can see they're accessible or not? For example, like pairs dot parent variable, click on that, evaluate. See here, it is accessible, right? We can access, and if you want to do something, you can act on those variables or payload or something like that, basically. Okay, now you are setting the payload, and means you are overriding the payload which is coming. Now I'll go to the next and I'll show you exactly what happened. Payload before this was parent flow payload, now it changed to child flow payload. See here, payload overwritten. Is that possible? It is not mandatory. Is that possible? Yes, it is possible. We have overwritten, right, from parent flow payload to child flow payload. Now attributes will not be changing, it will be just carried forward. Okay, variables, we'll see we are adding one more variable. What will happen to the next thing? Till now it is 1, now it is changed to 2, because I told you added on. Added on means new variables defined at set variables component will be added as a new variable. 2. What are two variables? One variable from the main flow, parent flow here, one more variable from the child flow here, basically. Parent flow variable, child flow variable. Those two are there. Now I will see what is the attribute, same, no changes. I already told you, just carry it forward, nothing will happen. Payload overwritten, obviously see here, child flow payload overwritten, right? Parent flow payload came here, but it is replaced with child flow payload. Now variables added on. We passed one variable and we created another variable here. Two variables are available in the parent flow also now, right now? Yes, see. Child flow, page flow, both are available. And now what is the message will be passed to the response? Because it is overwritten, right? Child flow payload. See. Is that clear? This is the thing. This is the scope of variables. Sorry, scope of mule event. Payload attributes variables across different flows.